Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. We're going to begin by hearing further evidence from Mr. David Gibson. So would you ask Mr. Gibson to come in, please? Morning, Mr. Gibson.
Good morning.
All ready to carry on?
I think so.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Gibson.
Good morning.
I've got a couple of follow-up questions from tomorrow's evidence, if I can, from yesterday's evidence, if I can start with those, please. The first relates to the discussion we were having yesterday about the minutes of the meeting at which you told us that Simon Lawrence had given you an assurance that the cladding was inert. You remember the evidence that you gave about that. And you told us about the minutes that you say handed at the meeting in hard copy form. My first question is this: was the normal course of events during the refurbishment that Artelia would issue minutes to TMO electronically via email in advance of the subsequent meeting?
That's correct.
Right. And so would it follow that there would be an email from Artelia to the TMO enclosing or attaching those minutes for you to look at? I see. That being so, when you were given minutes in hard copy during the subsequent meeting, was that unusual?
It was, because I had been checking for the minutes to see if they'd arrived so that I could check for that particular, that item had been minuted correctly. I remember contacting Claire in case I'd missed it and someone else had sent it out, and I was looking under the wrong name for the email. So that was why I remember that it was the only occasion we had received them in hard copy at the meeting. Always before that we received them electronically.
Did it occur to you to correspond with Artelia before the meeting and ask them yourself to send you the hard copy, or rather the soft copy minutes, so that you could check them before the meeting?
No, I think I was checking in the morning of the meeting. I think that might have been a later meeting, or perhaps I was checking the night before to see if they would usually have arrived a few days before.
Yes, I see. The other area I want to ask you, arising out of yesterday's evidence, relates to the Stage D report. Now, I think you told us yesterday, and just for the reference, it's yesterday's evidence at day 53, at page 29, lines 14 to 18, and also page 136, that you said that you didn't see any of Exover's fire safety reports.
I think there might have been reference within the Stage D report, but I can't.
Well, that's what I was going to put to you.
Yes.
Can I ask you then to go to ART 401364? Now, this is an email from Bruce Soanes. Do you see? It's dated the 20th of August 2013 to Phil Booth and Peter Madison. And it's also sent to you, as well as someone called Kulidjan. And I think Ms. Kulidjan was the interim manager, I suppose, or project manager between Paul Dunkerton and Claire Williams.
That's right? Correct.
Yes. Now, if you look at the email, it says, please see below a link to our completed Stage D report. The elevations and images are to a reduced resolution so that the whole document does not become huge. And there is the internet link to the Stage D report. And then it says, Exover's fire safety report from January is included, as is the updated BREEAM pre-assessment and Artelia's programme and revised cost estimate. If anyone needs anything further, or are there any comments, please do not hesitate to come back to me. You can see that. Now, it isn't right to refer to Exover's safety report as dated January, because we don't think that there was one dated January. But if we can see what was attached, can we go to ART 401363 at page 78? And that is a document that one would find within this link. And here it is on the screen, and it's issue number 1 of the OFSS, the Outline Fire Safety Strategy, dated the 31st of October 2012. So my question is, when you received the email from Bruce Soanes dated the 20th of August 2013, did you open the link, look at the Stage D report, and find within it this document?
I don't recall.
You don't recall. You could have done, I suppose,
Yes,
couldn't you? Yes. But you don't recall doing so. Can I then go back to where we were yesterday, and I want to go next to ART 402197. And where we were yesterday, while this is coming up, is March 2014 and the Ryden and others tender. And here is the final tender report for the Grenfell Tower project, produced by Artelia, and it's dated the 12th of March 2014, as you can see. Did you see this document at the time, do you recall?
I would have done, yes.
Yes. Can we go to page 4? We can see from this box on page 4 that the author was Twitchen Lim, and it was checked and approved by Phil Booth and issued to Peter Madison, as you can see from the second box on the left. And if we go to page 25, we can see Artelia's conclusions, paragraph 10. And their conclusion there is that Ryden have submitted the most competitive tender price and the highest quality, making it the most economically advantageous tender. It is worth noting that Ryden received the highest marks in all aspects of the tender evaluation. It is therefore recommended that approval is given to commence the formal standstill period in accordance with the EU regulations, and subject to the conclusion of this standstill period, the contract is awarded to Ryden Limited, and a notice is placed in the official journal of the European Union to this effect. Now, that's a clear recommendation for Ryden. I just wanted to know whether you saw this at the time and realised that at that time, 12th of March, Artelia were recommending Ryden as the contractor.
Yes, and I think there had been a draft report before this. This is the final one, and I don't think the recommendation had changed.
Right.
I could be wrong, but I think we knew that Ryden were going to be recommended.
You say you knew that Ryden were going to be recommended. From what date did you know that, do you think?
From after the end of the interview. I think I referenced yesterday Philip Booth, after we completed the interview or presentation and scored that, Philip Booth produced his spreadsheet with all the scores compiled.
Right.
And I think there were one or two minor things outstanding, but it was quite clear from that time that they would be the recommended contractor.
Yes, I see. And just to be clear, the interviews were on the 7th of March.
Correct.
5 days before this
Yes.
report. Yes. Can we then stick with this date, the 12th of March, and look at the process of value engineering, so it was called, between the 12th of March and the 18th of March. Now, we've seen already in your evidence some emails that Ryden were aware already of the need for some value engineering. And perhaps I should just show you the first of those. RYD 403277. This is an email of the 11th of March, so before Artelia's formal recommendation, from Jeff Henton to Alan Sharrocks and others internally within Ryden. Do you see that?
Yes.
Hi team, have spoken with Peter Madison at Kensington and Chelsea TMO Limited, who informs me that our price for the above is in first place, allied to which our presentation and documentation is also in first place. Therefore, subject to a small amount of value engineering, Peter should be in a position to recommend our appointment on this scheme to his board early next week. Now, it's obvious from the text of this email that Peter Madison had told Ryden that they were in first place, and that's before even Artelia's recommendation. Do you know when it was and how it came about that Peter Madison was talking to Jeff Henton at Ryden about being in first place?
I don't know. I know we had a problem that Jenny Jackson had identified with our budget and the submitted price being over, and could we enter into a contract, or could we recommend to the board enter into a contract that was over and above our budget price. So there was a difficulty to be overcome in that. And I think Jenny had got some legal advice at that time. I think there were two other things, but because Peter had, as you say, his board report was doing recommendation coming up very soon. I recall that the tender had been delayed, or extended tender period had been delayed by 2 weeks. We were expecting the tender back on the 31st of January, and it came back on the 14th of January, 14th of February, and that meant we had very little time to sort it out because Peter's reports need to be compiled and then circulated to board members, and there's a time scale for that. So there's very little time. We were trying to overcome a difficulty. We're trying to overcome the difficulty. I think we got legal advice from Towers and Hamlin, Jenny had got, on what we should do, what we could do in this, and the recommendation.
We're going to come to that.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. I think the answer was, my question was a narrower one than the answer that you've just given us would tend to suggest. Did you have any conversations with Peter Madison about him telling Jeff Henton of Ryden that they were in first place on or before the 11th of March?
I did not.
You did not. Did you know that he was going to tell Ryden that they were in first place?
I did not.
At that stage, no. Now, just back a day then, if we can, just to complete the emails at that time. RYD 30 is 94368, please. This is an email of the 10th of March, if we can see. In fact, if we can go to the bottom of the email chain, we could just run up through it very quickly. At the bottom of the email chain, we can see that Jeff Henton tells his assistant, Sandra Guest, on the 10th of March, and ask him to arrange lunch or an evening meal with Peter Madison. And you can see that that's in the email below that. And then if you go up a little bit, you can see that Jeff Henton at the top of the page sends an email to Steve Blake, also on the 10th of March, and says, spoke to Peter about the award and they are keen to get going. They need to do a fair amount of value engineering, which should be achievable. And my question is, on the 10th of March, and this is 3 days after the interview, but 2 days before Artelia's formal recommendation, did you know that Jeff Henton was speaking to Peter Madison about the award and about the need by Ryden to do a fair amount of value engineering?
I did not.
Did not. Can we then go to TMO 00850-707? This is an email chain between you, Peter Madison, Claire Williams, and others. And I want to start with the second email at the bottom of the page, please, if we can. And go to page 2, I think, please. Yes, there it is. And now this is the 12th of March. And we start with the email from Peter Madison to David Burns, copied to Claire Williams. And Jenny Jackson. Subject, confidential, Grenfell Tower pre-contract agreement. Dear all, I spoke to Steve Blake from Ryden today, that's the 12th of March. He was comfortable with closing the approximately £270,000 gap in the budget. He'll give us an estimate of the cost of pre-construction work, etc. And then he goes on, if we can get him something by Thursday, that will give a figure by the end of the week. I will factor this into the board approval. I think it would be worth Claire meeting somebody from Ryden to confirm that we have a shared understanding of the site boundaries and the interface with the Leadbitter site. Mm-hmm. Can you see if we can do this before next Wednesday? And that's from Peter Madison to David Burns. And then immediately above that...
Can I just ask, because I'm not sure David Burns...
No, I'm just going to show you that's right. In fact, you then get copied in to that same email that evening. Do you see, just above that, it's David Burns and Peter and David Gibson.
Yeah.
And then at the top of the page, the next day, in the morning of that day, 9:15, you then respond to Peter Madison and say, Peter Clare and I are working on this, regards David Gibson, which is you. Now, it looks as if the TMO wanted a figure from Steve Blake by the end of next week. In other words, is this right, before the preferred bidder would have been announced?
That's correct. I recall we met, Peter, myself, and Jenny met on the 12th of March.
Yes.
To discuss how we overcome, I think, 3 difficulties. One, the one I was describing before, about the how we got into a contract over and above our budget and how that could be recommended. The legal advice we had received indicated our choices were to award to the preferred contractor if it had gone through the process, if they were the winner and we followed the very prescriptive route of marking their submissions and they were the winner. We could choose to award or we could start again. But there was also reference within that email to, if you've got value engineering exercises or value engineering clauses within the contract, you could, once you're in contract, seek to use those clauses in order to overcome this difficulty. And I think that's what all we were trying to do was clarify. There was a process, clarify with Ryden that they were comfortable with this approach, because they could have, if we'd entered into a contract over and above our budget, they could have said, there could have been a claim against us for loss of profits, etc., if we hadn't reached an agreement with them that they were comfortable with this approach.
Well, we'll come to look at that answer in a little bit more detail very, very shortly. My question, you've answered it, I think, is yes, it was before the preferred bidder was announced.
Correct.
My next question is, were discussions like this, getting figures for value engineering, being held with any other bidder other than Ryden?
The marking of the tender submission is a very prescribed route. You have asked them for submissions, you have stated to them how they will be marked, and you need to follow that process. It doesn't allow for you to talk to other contractors. You've got a preferred bidder at the end of the process, or you don't. But it doesn't make any allowances for talking to other contractors. That would breach the regulations.
So is the answer to my question that although you were having conversations with Ryden at this stage before the preferred bidder was announced, you weren't having the same conversations about value engineering with any other bidder?
That's correct.
Thank you. How could you properly be having discussions with Ryden about price reductions without also talking to the others at the same time equally?
It wouldn't be allowed under the ODU regulations. If we have put a tender out, asked for submissions, and it's very prescriptive in terms of how it's scored, it doesn't allow us to then change that route.
Well, I can understand not having any discussions at all, but how could you be having discussions with Ryden but none of the other bidders? Wouldn't that have been unfair to the other bidders?
I think it was clarifying a process.
But it wasn't, was it, with respect, Mr. Gibson? You were actually asking for hard figures.
I think what we were seeking was comfort from them, because we had provided some of the hard figures. We also needed figures for the pre-commencement agreement, which is the contract we would enter into with Ryden at so much a month until we were in a position to enter into the main contract. And there was a separate issue with the public realm works, which were to be done by the Kelk contractor, because the borders between our two sites had to be defined, and that work, I think, was to be paid and carried out by the contractor, but we'd allowed within our tender, we'd asked the contractor to price that. So that cost of that work was within the submitted price from them. So we need to clarify how much was of the cost was associated with that, because that would come off the sort of the gap between our budget and their submitted price.
Forgive me for pressing you a little bit, Mr. Gibson, but I do need an answer.
Yep.
How could it have been proper to have any of these discussions about price reductions with Ryden alone and not having those discussions with any of the other bidders?
I'm very clear on the directions I've been given in terms of working with Jenny and what you could or could not do. It was very prescriptive, which is why, for example, the interview, we had been told in advance by Jenny, you are not allowed to ask any questions. You have to ask, if you ask a question to one contractor, you have to ask the same question to them all. So you couldn't explore their responses.
Well, if you have to ask the same question to all bidders during the interview on the 7th of March,
Yeah.
Surely it would have followed in your mind at the time that if you were going to have discussions about value engineering with one of those bidders, you would have to have them with all.
No.
That's not how you understood it.
No, that would have been a very clear breach of the regulations.
But you thought that having one discussion about price reduction with one bidder wasn't a breach of the regulations. Is that your evidence?
I think we were in an uncomfortable position, but we couldn't talk to 3 contractors. That would not be allowed. We were trying to clarify a process at this point.
How about talking to none of them until after the announcement?
The problem was that Peter needed to get information for his board report. And we needed to be sure that Ryden were comfortable with our approach. We were trying to agree a process with them and get an understanding from them that they were agreeable to we would enter into a contract at a higher figure. We would use the value engineering clauses to then work out how we bridge that gap.
So this was dictated, was it, by TMO's internal processes and requirements to get a report out quickly?
That was a significant factor.
I follow. Well, let's just see how this event, this continues. You respond, as we can see, on this email to Peter Madison that you are working on this with Claire Williams.
Yep.
Let's then go to RYD 403295, please. This is an email from Steve Blake, internally at Ryden, on the 12th of March at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So this I think, post-times the email we've just looked at from you internally. And in his first paragraph, he says, we are going to be asked by K&C to find some further value engineering savings in addition to those identified in our tender. Let's wait until this approach is made before going to the supply chain. In terms of value allocation, we took care to make provision against a specification that was exactly compliant. Peter M. is going to forward some ideas tomorrow. Now, do you know of any conversation between Peter Madison and Steve Blake in which Peter Madison told Steve Blake that he was going to forward some ideas the next day, 13th of March?
Yes.
What did you know of that conversation or those conversations?
Peter, Jenny Jackson and myself met to discuss our position and what we needed to do. We were uncomfortable with the position we were in. I think there is a record before that of, because I'd referred to the legal advice we got, and an offline discussion. So I was aware at the end of the meeting, in terms of how we took forward our approach, that Peter would give Steve Blake a ring. I was asked to then compile a spreadsheet and sent it to him the next day.
I see. We'll come to the spreadsheet in just a moment. Can I just ask you why what you've just told the inquiry isn't in any of your witness statements?
I had forgotten all about this.
Did you not see any of the emails I'm now showing you when you were preparing?
No, I do.
When you were preparing
Sorry,
your witness.
I don't.
Can I finish my question?
Sorry, my apologies.
Thank you. Were you not shown these emails when you were preparing your witness statements, even as late as the witness statement of the 3rd of October this year, 2 weeks ago?
At that stage, yes, I think I was.
So why didn't
Yes.
you say anything about these conversations that you've just told us about in that statement?
I think we wanted to keep the clarifications and corrections I was making to my first statement, just deal with those points, because it was quite clear that this was going to arise during my giving witness here.
So your position was that you would rather wait to be examined on it orally rather than say anything about it candidly, clearly, and openly in your witness statements.
When I did my first witness statement, I had forgotten, I didn't recollect any of this. It was only until I'd seen some of the emails and been shown some of the emails at a much later date, after they'd appeared in the inquiry, that I was able to piece together what had happened.
But you weren't able to piece this conversation together until I just took you through these emails just now. Is that what you're telling us?
No, I could piece it together a few weeks ago, and I could have been put in my statement, but it was likely that I was going to be asked questions on this at the inquiry, so I didn't feel the need, or the advice to me was we know that would be dealt with at the inquiry.
Well, I don't want to know about the advice that's given to you. Let's see how we go then, Mr. Gibson. The next email I want to look at with you, please, is RYD 403302. This is a chain of emails on the 13th of March 2014. And it starts at the bottom of page 1 and over onto page 2. You see. And on page... well, it'd be better look at the very bottom of page 1. This is from you to Steve Blake. Do you see that? And then if we flip over to page 2, we can see the bulk of the email. And it says this: Peter Madison has given, of the TMO, has given me your contact details. I understand you are currently in a meeting. I've attached a simple spreadsheet indicating the areas we would like you to look at in relation to the possible savings. Our target is around £800,000, which included the cladding savings already priced and any grant income to the scheme. Could you come back to us early Monday with some indicative timescales and confirmation as to where you consider there are opportunities for savings, with figures where possible? We're currently allowing for pre-start activities at £100,000 a month for, say, 3 months. Can you also confirm if you can make a meeting on Monday afternoon with Peter, myself, and Claire Williams, the project manager for the scheme, at our offices? It might be useful if you can bring your estimator also. Don't think I need the rest. Now, you are clearly telling Mr. Blake that Peter Madison has instructed you to send Ryden some suggestions for value engineering. That's right, isn't it? We can see that.
What I'm sending him is as much information as I have on what the difficulties were. And I think if you follow this further down the line, once we have signed the pre-commencement agreement, there is then at the contractor introduction meeting, Artelia then take over the process of dealing formally with value engineering and the public realm works.
Right. Can we look at the... well, let me ask you, is this the first time that you were in contact with Steve Blake?
Yes.
It was. And do you agree that the effect or thrust of your email is a specific instruction to Ryden, or request if you like, to try and make savings over and above the price they'd tendered?
Including the price they've tendered, because within their tender return we already had identified potential savings, because at that time we didn't know what cladding would be acceptable to the planners. So we couldn't make a decision on that.
Yeah, no, it's a much simpler question I'm asking you. Do you accept that the thrust of this email was to tell Ryden that they had to come down further from their bid price?
No.
You don't?
No.
Well, can you explain what you meant when you said that you were indicating areas we would like you to look at in relation to possible savings? Those were savings, surely, over and above the 9.2 million that they'd bid.
I was giving them enough information to try and explain what the problem was, so that there were areas they would be looking at. So I was, my wording might be slightly bad, but the intention was to clarify the process, but being as open as possible with them on what the gap was, what we've identified, and asking them to look at other areas.
Right. Well, you use the expression "our target." Our target is circa, if you like, £800,000. Mm-hmm. What was the target? Was it a savings target? Well, what was it?
The target was to get to our budget, which was in the region of 8.5 million.
Exactly. And the difference between 9.2 million odd, which was the Ryden's bid, and the 8.415 million pounds, which was the construction budget that you had, was £800,000 or so, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And the aim of this email was to get them down from 9.2 million by a process of what you might call value engineering to your budget of 8.415 million.
That's
Is that
correct.
not right? Thank you. Now let's look at the spreadsheet. RYD 403301, please. RYD 403301. And if we just click on the native. Did you draft this document?
I'm not sure that I did. I think, but I can't recollect totally. I think we had met with Atelier before this to agree the areas, because we had recognised the problem some weeks before.
When do you think this document was first produced?
I think I can't remember. I had the information. I think we had the information before, so I probably just put the information into this format.
I see.
Yeah.
Now we can see it says the works budget is £8.415 million. The cost savings to be made need to be in the region of £800,000. Mm-hmm. So that really reflects what you said in your email, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. The list below is not exhaustive, and there may be other elements for consideration. And then you talk about the pre-commencement costs under that. And then you can see the target of £800,000 or greater. You see at the bottom of the box in bold, mm-hmm. of which item 3, do you see, cladding, subject to planning approval, was mentioned in tender as alternative costs, mm-hmm. £243,000. So that's a saving which is already in there of £243,000.
Yep.
And then there's £100,000 for a possible eco fund grant. But you've still got to get up to the 800,000, which was your target, yes?
Yes, the 243 was within the 800,000.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there were still gaps, weren't there?
Yes.
Such as windows, crown design for the roof,
yeah.
and other things.
Yes.
And of course, if you could get the savings in relation to cladding higher than 243,000, that would have been a bonus, wouldn't it? Because it would have reduced the figure closer to the 800 that you wanted. Yeah.
That's correct.
Then it says underneath, Ryden to confirm, if possible, by Monday, 17th March, agreement in principle to above. And then at the bottom, Ryden to confirm possible meeting with TMO at TMO's offices Tuesday, 18th March, PM, ? Did you put that in there?
Yes.
Yes. Did it not occur to you at this point, when producing this document and sending it to Steve Blake at Ryden, that your budget, the 8.415 million odd pounds, was simply too low for the project that you wanted?
No.
No?
No.
Why is that?
I think we'd had very late during the tender process, I think just before the original tender return, we'd had a revised tender estimate from Atelier, which was well in excess of anything we'd previously discussed. I think that we were actually quite pleased when we saw the Ryden tender submission figures, because it wasn't as big a gap as we thought there might be, and we thought this is something that we can make work.
And yet, You still wanted them to come down by a further £800,000 in order to get the contract.
We're looking at the areas that there might be alternative prices. We're looking at areas of things that we could change. We're looking at sort of landscaping, as I mentioned, because that was the public realm works, which we knew would be paid for by others, and that would increase our budget.
You realise, presumably, that the 9.2 million that Ryden had bid was about just under, or about £800,000
Yes,
itself,
yes.
less than the Artelia indicative benchmark number, wasn't it?
Yes,
And that Ryden was significantly cheaper than the next bid up by, I think, about £600,000, wasn't it?
that's correct.
So you were already getting a significantly lower bid than anybody had previously indicated.
Correct.
And now you wanted a further £800,000 on top of that. In those circumstances, Mr. Gibson, my question is, did it not occur to you to go to Peter Madison or anybody else and say, look, this budget is simply too small for what we want. We need to rethink what the scope of our project?
No. We thought the gap was bridgeable. We'd already identified some things that would bridge that gap. There are other areas of work priced within their submission that we would get funding for elsewhere. I think we mentioned the eco grant of 100,000 and the landscaping costs that we wanted them to separate out from us because that would be paid for by others. So we'd already gone some of the way to identifying how we might bridge that gap at that time.
And looking at the confirmation meeting on Tuesday the 18th of March, which we know happened and we'll come to in a moment, you wanted that confirmation before the announcement of the result of the tender.
That's correct.
Can we then look at Steve Blake's response? First, please, RYD 403310 at page 1, which is his email of the 13th of March at the bottom of the page, to you, copied to Claire Williams, to hi David, understand what's required and see no reason why this can't be achieved. Your spreadsheet says a Tuesday PM meeting rather than Monday PM as email, which would work perfectly. As requested, we will respond early Monday, that was the 17th, regarding opportunities for savings and timescales. So it looks, well, let me put it ask you this way. When you got this email from Steve Blake, did you see that he understood exactly what you were asking for?
Yes, because by the 13th of March, Peter would have had a conversation with Steve Blake on the 12th of March.
Right.
To clarify what he needed and what we wanted to do.
And then you responded at the top of the page the next day, 14th of March. Steve, thanks for swift response. Yes, I meant Tuesday PM. I will forward a meeting invite. And then if we look at the next email that Steve Blake sends you on the Monday, the 17th of March, that's at RYD 403348, please. And let's go to page 1. He says to you, David, Katie and Simon have been on the case today and will have a range of options to present for tomorrow. Hopefully we will be in a position to achieve the VE levels needed. See that? Mm-hmm. Now that reference to tomorrow was a reference to the meeting that was fixed for and indeed then took place on the afternoon of the 18th of March. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes. And so far as you were concerned, you were clear in your mind that Ryden clearly understood that you wanted options to achieve the value engineering levels needed. In other words, £800,000 of savings.
We wanted assurance that they were comfortable with our approach.
Well, it wasn't just comfortable, was it? Because you made it quite clear in the spreadsheet that what you needed was a reduction in cost of the project.
Yes.
Achieved by a change to the specification.
I don't think we were changing the specification necessarily at this time.
Well, wasn't that the underlying premise? You were asking them to concentrate on particular areas where the existing specification could be modified in order to produce a saving in the cost of the project.
I think that's part of it.
What else is there then?
I think we'd asked them could they identify other areas. Yes, indeed, there might be changes to the specification, but at that time, no decisions had been made. We were just trying to get as much information together to ensure that they were comfortable and we were comfortable.
You see, I asked the question because a little while ago you said what you wanted to discuss with them was process.
Yes.
But actually what you wanted to discuss was the application of a process. You were interested in the outcome of the process, not just the process, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Then let's turn to the 18th of March, 2014 meeting. Were you at that meeting?
Yes.
Did it take place at the TMO's offices?
Yes.
Was it in the afternoon?
Yes, I think.
And the purpose of that meeting was to discuss what we've seen in this email run up to this point, the savings that could be made.
It was discuss the approach. They were comfortable with the approach. It was to give them as much information as possible so that they could satisfy themselves. They would be comfortable with the approach. And it was allowing them the opportunity to potentially present other areas for us to consider.
Did the estimator that you'd asked to attend from Ryden actually attend?
I think so.
Does the name Katie Bachelier mean anything to you?
I recognise the name.
She was the Ryden estimator at this point.
Yes.
She attended that meeting, didn't she?
I think so.
Yeah. And the point of her attending that meeting as an estimator, someone very close to very precise figures, was so that she could discuss very precise figures with you. That's why you wanted her there, no?
Would have thought an estimator would be appropriate to have at this meeting when we were discussing costs, and in order for us to be comfortable and for them to be comfortable with our approach to overcome the problem we identified.
Were any notes or minutes taken by anybody at that meeting?
I probably took some notes of my own, but it was an offline meeting.
But it was an offline meeting.
Yes.
Do you mean that it was a secret meeting and therefore should be unrecorded?
Yes.
You do. Thank you. And why was it to be a secret meeting for which no record was to be taken, and indeed none exists?
There had been communication with Artelia before, in terms of Jenny had put forward a proposal for overcoming the problem that we had. Artelia agreed that approach to an offline meeting or informal discussions. One said one, I can't remember which one said which, but it wasn't a secret. It was agreement to an offline meeting to overcome the difficulties that we had.
Most people have secret meetings, or offline as you might describe it, and don't take records of it because they don't want the fact of the meeting and the contents to be discovered by anybody else. That's right in respect of this meeting, isn't it?
No.
So why not take a record of it then?
Because it was a very brief meeting. They didn't, from my recollection, have all the costs. There were a number of areas that they stated they were working on and looking into. I think we had agreed that the allowance for the pre-commencement agreement was in the right ballpark. They were comfortable with that. So it was just an agreement in principle.
Yes, it was an agreement in principle which you absolutely needed in order to be able to move the process forward and go to the board.
Yes.
Why wasn't it recorded? It was important.
I think what we wanted was an understanding.
What you wanted was a secret understanding that was not discoverable by anybody else, least of all the other bidders. That's right, isn't it? Can you not accept that?
It was an offline meeting.
Right.
Yes.
Right. We've recorded your answer. At the meeting, did Ryden agree to make the savings that you had requested and that they had told you should be achievable?
They agreed they were comfortable in being able to identify and bridge the gap between the two sets of figures.
Can you look at RYD 403489, please? This is an email from Katie Bachelier, of Ryden. She's the estimator we talked about, sent on the 20th of March, 2014, so 2 days after the meeting, and it's sent to Peter Madison, Claire Williams, and you, copied to Simon Lawrence and Steve Blake. Further to our meeting on Tuesday, please find attached our summary list of value engineering options. Now, can we look at the attachment? It's at RYD 403490. And here is the document she attached. Do you remember this document at the time?
Yes. Yes, I would have seen this at the time, and it reflects what I had said previously in terms of we didn't have the figures at the meeting, and I've now forwarded some figures to give us comfort. They've identified some other areas.
Yes. We could see that it was attached to the email that Katie Bachelier sent to you on the 20th of March.
Yeah.
Did you see this document at the meeting?
No.
You didn't?
No.
So is it right then that the first time you saw this document was when Katie Bachelier sent it to you on the 20th of March?
Yes.
Yes, I see.
Yes.
Was there any discussion at the meeting about savings in respect of cladding? And in particular, a discussion about substituting zinc with aluminium for a saving of £293,368?
I think that had already been priced within their tender submission. We knew that the cladding was subject to the agreement and approval of the planners. Whilst we might have preferred the lower cost, we didn't have any certainty at this time which material would be used.
Your simple spreadsheet had a saving for cladding in it of £243,000, didn't it?
Yep.
And that had come from the tender, yes,
Yes.
as the alternative
Yep.
cost. But now you were being shown a figure of £293,000 odd pounds by way of saving for cladding, so 50,000 or so greater saving.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any discussion at the 18th of March meeting about a greater saving on cladding?
I don't recall.
Right. Now, if you go, please, to RYD 403491, we can see that looking at the various suggested savings on cladding, the largest saving was on face fixed as an alternative aluminium system, which gave a saving of £376,175, with the alternative aluminium system cassette of £293,368. Was there any discussion about an alternative system which would produce an even higher saving for aluminium, namely if face fixed was used £376,000 odd pounds? Was that discussed at the meeting?
At the meeting on the 18th? I don't think so. I think
Right.
this arrived afterwards.
Right. Did the spreadsheet that you were sent by Katie Bachelier on the 20th of March tell you that the £800,000 target for savings was achievable, partly by way of reduction of the price for the cladding?
Sorry, can you?
Yes.
say-
Did the spreadsheet that Katie Bachelier sent you, showing the different savings for cladding
Yes.
options, tell you that the £800,000 saving target could be achieved?
It gave us some comfort it could be achieved, but at this stage it was subject to the planners agreeing what the material would be.
Right. Can we then go to the next topic, which is the notification of the preferred bidder, and look, please, at ART 408632. Now, this is the letter under which Ryden was told that it was the preferred bidder. You see that?
Yes.
That's the final form of letter that was sent, and it's entitled Notice of Preferred Bidder Status, and note the date, 18th of March 2014. So the same day as the meeting we've just been discussing, Mr. Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
Can I assume that you've seen this letter before,
Yes.
and were aware of it at the time?
Yes, because we knew who the preferred bidder would be. This was just the formality of issuing that.
Yes. You can see that in the first main paragraph, it thanks Ryden for the tender and says that we, that's Artelia and you indeed, as the TMO, have concluded the tender evaluation process and we have been authorised, it says, by the TMO as employer's agent for the above-mentioned project to inform you that you are the preferred bidder and it is the intention of KCTMO to enter into a contract with you. And then it says this, subject to the agreement of the site boundary and formal approval from the KCTMO Board and Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea Council. Mm-hmm. Now, we've looked at this letter a number of times. We can't find anything in it about a condition about value engineering. It doesn't say subject to arriving at a final figure by way of value engineering. Why is that? Why was that not in the letter?
I think this is just the legal wording that's been inserted. It indicates that there were discussions, and I said there were discussions about boundary adjustments and the public realm works, and that we needed to get approval. So it was, I think Jenny had agreed this addition to it, and it was just her being correct and saying there are things still to be clarified.
Well,
so it's subject to these matters. You are the preferred.
There's no indication in this letter that the contract would be dependent on Ryden reducing their overall construction price.
Correct.
There's no mention of the meeting of the 18th of March either, is there?
Correct.
There's no meeting of value, and there's no mention of discussions about value engineering or a target of £800,000. Is
Correct.
There? Why is that?
Because it was an offline meeting. I think.
So the conditions, anybody reading this letter would think that the only conditions for entry into a contract between the TMO and Ryden would be agreement about the site boundary and formal approval from the TMO board and the council. That's right, isn't it?
Correct.
And anybody reading this letter would not know that, in fact, underneath it all was a offline, as you put it, discussion, agreement or understanding that Ryden would reduce their construction costs by a further £800,000 or so. That's right, isn't it?
I think I've explained that. There was a problem. We'd had an offline meeting. It wouldn't be in here because the advice we had from the solicitors was you need to award the contract to the preferred bidder, or your option is you've got a preferred bidder. This is what this is saying. You need to award it that, and then you can go through the legal process of using the value engineering clauses to achieve the target.
Now, we're going to come to the advice in a moment, because I'm very interested to know what you say about it. But just focusing on my question, you've answered it in the way you have. Let me try this a slightly different way. You didn't even tell Artelia that you were having these discussions about value engineering, or a meeting to discuss value engineering, did you?
I think we did.
Well, let's take it in stages.
Yes.
Did you tell Artelia that you had asked... did you tell Artelia that you were having a meeting with Ryden before the announcement of the preferred bidder to discuss a target reduction of £800,000?
No.
No. And Artelia weren't at the meeting, were they?
That's correct.
Nor was Studio E?
Correct.
Yes. Did it occur to you to go to Studio E when you were told what the basis of these reductions was to be, namely a reduction in the price of the cladding and a substitution from zinc to aluminium, to go to Studio E and ask them whether that change in product was something that they could advise you on?
No.
No. Let's look at another notice, shall we? And I think I can take this quite quickly. This is ART 402224. And this is a notice to Mr. Hazelton at Mullally, who was one of the losers, as indeed it says in the first paragraph. In the first paragraph. Now, again, we can see there's no mention of targeted savings or value engineering as the reason for identifying somebody else, in fact, Ryden, as the winner, is there?
Correct.
And although we don't need to go to it, the notice to Durkan says very much the same thing. That's ART 402219. And can I suggest to you that there was a good reason for not telling the other bidders that one of the reasons for awarding the contract to Ryden was because they had agreed to reduce their price by £800,000 or so. And that is because if they discovered that the TMO were discussing cost savings on the price with Ryden prior to the award, that raised the risk of a challenge to the award decision.
Correct.
Yes. Can we then look at the Trower's advice that you've referred to now a number of times in your evidence this morning? This is at ART 406433, please. And it's an email chain on the 2nd and 3rd of March 2014. So about a week before the internal discussions we've seen with Ryden and the discussions that Peter Madison had and then you had with Ryden about value engineering the price down. And we can start, I think, with the second page, page 2 of this email run. And I want to look with you at the email of the 2nd of March from Jenny Jackson to Phil Booth, Simon Cash, Claire Williams and Peter Blythe, copied to you. And I want to look at it in full, if we may. It's a discussion on advice given by Trowers and Hamlins, who are solicitors, reputable solicitors, on procurement. And it starts, please can we discuss how we intend to bridge the gap between the £9.249 odd million tender submitted and the 8.5 million client budget. And clearly the 9.2 that's referred to there is the Ryden tender price, isn't it?
Yeah.
The advice obtained from Trowers and Hamlins is clear, and I'm going to read it to you. It's in smaller print on this page. KCTMO has advertised the contract as a restricted procedure based on an estimated contract value of £8 million to £10 million. Tenderers are required to submit a price for undertaking the programme, and KCTMO is required to assess the tenders based on the price/quality criteria you have set out in the tender documents. The restricted procedure does not permit a contracting authority to undertake negotiations with tenderers prior to the contract award, and does not provide for the contracting authority to revise the tender document or for tenderers to submit revised best and final offers. To do so would be a breach of the EU regulations, even if you allowed all the tenderers to renegotiate their prices. Your only EU-compliant options are to assess the tenders and award the contract to the tenderer who scored the highest based on your price/quality criteria, or not award the contract and run a new procurement exercise. If the contract allows it, you may run value engineering exercises with your selected tenderer, but only once the contract has been entered into. In the event that there is a formal challenge, we may be required to disclose some/elements of the formal reports, so I suggest the references to value engineering are removed for the moment. I think the way forward is to enter into the contract for £9.249 odd million and then embark on the VE post-award. So the award is on the basis of the published evaluation criteria. There will need to be some informal quotes-unquote discussion with the preferred contractor prior to award so that there is an understanding of the approach. Views, ? Now, that's her email in full. Did you read the advice contained within the email I've just read to you from Trowers and Hamlins?
Yes.
Did you understand it?
Yes.
Was there any part of that advice that was not clear to you?
No.
In her final paragraph, you can see what she says. Did you, and I'm not going to reread it to you, did you inform Peter Madison of Jenny Jackson's thoughts as to the way forward?
I can't recall. I would expect that Peter may have had discussions with Jenny at this time. I don't know.
Did you think in your own mind that Jenny Jackson's approach as to the way forward, namely a quotes informal, unquotes discussion, might itself have been contrary to Trowers and Hamlin's advice?
Yes.
You did? Yes. But as we've seen, in fact what happened is that you had not only discussions of the approach with Ryden, but discussions about actual figures by way of value engineering as part of your decision whether to award the contract to them at all. We've seen that. Was that not completely contrary to the clear legal advice that you received from Trowers and Hamlins and understood?
It was.
Now, considering the documents that you've just seen, do you agree that Ryden received preferential treatment?
No.
Well, they were told that they were in pole position and they were given a chance to produce value engineering figures before notification in circumstances where the others were not. Does that not tell us that Ryden was given preferential treatment?
No, it tells us that we followed a process in assessing the tenders to get to a preferred contractor status, and it tells us that we had identified a problem. We had taken legal advice. We were looking at a way to overcome the problem. I think it's quite clear.
Why did you not mention the fact that you had gone against Trowers and Hamlin's advice in the process of selecting Ryden in your first witness statement?
I think I'd said previously I had forgotten all about this. I had retired this was 2 years, 3 years afterwards. I was trying to, in my statement, respond to the questions the inquiry had asked me, and I was trying to do it as best as possible from memory. At the time, I had very limited access to information.
Even as late as the 3rd of October this year, 2 weeks ago, you had the opportunity.
I knew at that time.
You knew at that
yes.
time. Yes, Mr. Gibson, and I'm going to suggest to you that you didn't mention anything about going against Trowers and Hamlin's advice and conducting an improper and compromised process with Ryden because you knew it was wrong.
No, because I knew I would be questioned on it here.
Can I ask you to go to your first witness statement, please, page 14. And go to paragraph 72. You say there, Ryden were appointed following a rigorous tender process conducted under the transparency of the public procurement exercise, that is OJEU. Now, Mr. Gibson, in light of the documents we've been looking at this morning and your evidence about it, can you still maintain that the tender progress was rigorous and transparent?
Yes.
How can you possibly maintain that it was rigorous and transparent?
Okay, sorry.
In the light of what you've told us about
the tender
this
process
morning?
was rigorous. I'm making a point. The tender assessing the tenders was a rigorous process. I agree that there wasn't full transparency because there had been an offline meeting to overcome a problem.
And in saying that the process was conducted under the transparency of the public procurement exercise, that is OJEU, is utterly misleading because it was no such thing.
I disagree.
Very well. Can we go to what happened a little bit later in March now, which is the approval by the TMO board? This is TMO 100311040. These are the TMO board minutes from the 27th of March 2014, and I'd like to look with you, please, at page 2, item 2. I'm a bit too quick. It's my fault. Can we go back to page 1, because I just want to show you who was there. There's a large cast of those present. You see that?
Yes.
And in attendance, Robert Black, Yvonne Birch, and underneath that, a little bit lower down, Mr. Peter Madison. And then if we go to where I wanted to go, which is page 2, item 2, here we see the heading, Grenfell Tower Refurbishment, and Peter Madison gave a progress report. And it says, if you look a little bit lower down, Ryden's, it's third line, Ryden's was the preferred contractor, and because there was a very tight perimeter on costs, we would work with them on the detail of their tender. In addition, there was some further work to be done on the planning permissions and the type of materials and cladding in order to contain costs. There would also be further work on energy, and it was hoped to attract some funding. When these two pieces of work were completed, it was hoped to carry out the contract within budget. It was recommended that we enter into a pre-contract arrangement with Ryden's in order to progress the project. That was his report. And then we can see at the bottom that the board members raised some points. And the first of which is, it was pointed out that there was a big difference in the prices being offered on page 83. And that's we don't need to see that, but that was the prices as a result of the bid.
Yep.
However, Ryden's was consistently lower. And then if we turn the page, at the top of the page at point 2, it says, it was queried why there was such a big deviation in tender prices and whether Ryden's had put in a low tender in order to obtain the contract. Confirmation was given that the pre-contract period was being recommended in order to look at these issues. It was queried whether this could be interpreted as being contractually committed. However, if we didn't get within the budget, it would not be committed, but there was confidence that it would be possible to get the contract within budget. And then item 3, it was queried whether we had confidence in Ryden's pricing, and confirmation was given that we had received a very detailed tender report, which was also competitive. And then the decision is made at the bottom to award a pre-contract agreement to Ryden and to appoint them as contractor for the project, not in reverse order to the way I've read that out. Now, it looked, well, first of all, did you see these board minutes when they came out in the May of 2014?
No, they aren't generally circulated. They wouldn't normally be circulated to me.
Right. Did any of the executive team discuss the concerns that were recorded there with you?
No.
Was there any concern elsewhere within the TMO that Ryden's pricing might have been too low?
I wasn't aware of any.
Nobody seems to have told the board that the other tenderers had not been given the opportunity to value engineer or to discuss their approach informally, as you might put it. That's right, isn't it? There's no record of it. My question is, to your knowledge, is it right that nobody on the board was told that the other tenderers had not been given the same opportunity to have these discussions as Ryden had?
I don't know.
You don't
I
know.
wasn't at the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a final topic, or two, I think, which I think I can cover quite quickly. It would be sensible
Well,
if
see
I
if you
could try
can.
to. Yes.
Yes, right.
Can I then turn to the topic of CDM regulations? Now, can I go back to the contractor induction meeting of 1st of April 2014, first of all, and that's at TMO 1002323. And this is a document we've seen very many times now in the course of this module, in this inquiry. If we look at how Keith Bushell, who is described there, if we go down a little bit to item 2.1, please. I'm sorry, 1.4, top of the page. The role of CDMC will be performed by KB of ART. So that's Keith Bushell of Artelia. When you saw these notes, did you understand what CDMC was?
Yes.
You did. And what role did you understand the TMO had under the CDM regulations 2007?
We needed to appoint a CDMC coordinator. We were quite clear on that. I think prior to this, I had many months before, met Keith Bushell, and I think he talked me through the process.
Who within the TMO was in charge of making sure that the TMO carried out its role under the CDM regulations 2007?
Who within the
TMO? Who within the TMO was in charge, or had responsibility, for making sure the TMO carried out its own role under the CDM regulations 2007, specifically in relation to the Grenfell Tower project, I should say?
I think we all had a responsibility to ensure that a CDMC was appointed.
Right.
We knew that we needed to appoint one, and we did appoint one. It was part of the original Artelia appointment.
Could we then, yes, it was. Could we then look at the progress meeting minutes for progress meeting number 16 of the 22nd of October 2015? Those are at TMO 00830091. And I'd like to go in that, please, to page 4. And on page 4, we see item 3.2 under the broader heading, Contractors Report and Programme. And under 3.2 has a heading, CDM. F10, it says, expires tomorrow. There's some more material about that we'll be looking at with others. And then it says PMN, and that's post-meeting note. Under the 2015 regulations, if the PD appointment finishes before the end of the works, then the principal contractor takes on the PD role. That's principal designer role. This means the principal contractor puts together the H&S file, health and safety file, for the client for discussion at the next progress meeting, in bold. Now, Mr. Gibson, you were on the distribution list for these minutes. Mm-hmm. Did you read them at the time, do you think?
Yes, I did. I was aware of the discussions. Can you remind me of the date of this?
Yes, the 22nd of October 2015. So that's about...
Yes, I think prior to this, there were discussions in the background.
There were, and that's true. And my question was, did you read the minutes? And you said you did. My next question is, at this point, so this is late-ish October 2015, and so after the 2015 CDM regulations had come into force,
yep.
What did you understand the TMO's CDM regulations or obligations under those regulations to be at that time?
That the CDMC coordinator role was being deleted, and we need to appoint a principal designer, I think.
Yes. And whose obligation at that time was it, or sphere of responsibility, within the TMO to make sure that the TMO complied with the updated or amended CDM regulations? Replaced the new CDM regulations.
Right. It was clear that the client had the responsibility, so myself or Peter, but it was clear that we were in a difficult position because of the change in the rules. We were aware that others had effectively dealt with this with projects on site by the CDMCs becoming the principal designer role, but for whatever reason, Artelia didn't offer us that service, and I'm still not sure why they weren't able to provide that.
Let's then look at the next progress meeting, which is number 17. This one was 16. We go to 17. That's the 17th of November 2015 at TMO 100-11410. And if we go, first of all, to the first page of that, we can see the date, and we can see that you were in attendance as the second attendee down on the list. And if we can turn, please, to page 2 and look at item or paragraph 2.8, we can see that discussion took place about the CDM regulations. And there we can see it says CDM regulations 2015, AM noted the PMN, post-meeting note, on previous minutes, copied here for completeness, and then they're set out. And then it goes on to say, it was agreed that Ryden are not the PD, principal designer, under the CDM regulations 2015. The TMO as the client are to undertake this role. If you just turn the page. It was further agreed that Ryden would be responsible for collating and presenting the H&S file information in accordance with the employer's requirements and the PCI, and present to the TMO as PD. Now, working one's way through the acronyms as best one can there, is it right that as a consequence of the change in the regulations, unless a principal designer was appointed, the client, namely the TMO, would become the principal designer?
Correct.
Yeah. And this minute is recording that Ryden were to present the health and safety file for the building to the TMO as a principal designer. In other words, the TMO would receive it in its capacity as principal designer. Is that what was discussed?
Yes, we were uncomfortable with being the principal, taking on the principal designer role. I don't think we were well advised at that time by Artelia. We had asked them, they had said they couldn't do it. We had been pointed in the direction of Ryden. They said they couldn't do it. I think we asked Studio E, I might be wrong, and who we asked. We asked a number of people, yeah. And we also asked people from our now in-place framework consultants whether they could take on the role. And no one was willing to take on the role. So we didn't have another option.
Can I ask you to look at Peter Madison's second witness statement to see what he says about this? This is TMO 008473337, and I'd like to go to page 9 within it. And he says at paragraph 9, sorry, paragraph 40 on page 9, halfway down that paragraph, the TMO, therefore, took on the role, and it was explained to me by David Gibson that the role would sit with TMO by default and would be a technicality. Did you tell me, Peter Madison, that the role of principal designer would be a technicality?
Yes, I think I explained to him fully the situation, the attempts we had made to appoint a principal designer. We didn't wish to undertake the role. We weren't being supported by others. There had been discussions about an advice given, but I can't recall who gave advice, whether it was Artelia, but in discussions with Claire, I was aware there was advice given that if it was agreed that the design was fundamentally complete, there was less risk to us taking on the role, and it was on that basis that we reluctantly took on the role.
Yeah. You, I think, have answered my question. Yes, you did tell Peter Medicine that the role would be a technicality. Mm-hmm. It's a regulatory requirement, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So why did you describe it as a technicality? I'm not saying you can't have technical regulatory requirements, Mr. Gibson, far from it.
Yep.
But why did you describe it as a technicality?
Because we were uncomfortable taking on the role, no one else would take on the role, and we had to take it by default.
I understand both of those parts of that answer.
Yeah.
My question really is, why did you use the word technicality? Why did you give Mr. Madison the impression that it would be a technicality?
I can't remember what words I used. I think I had made him fully aware of the position we were in.
Right. Because using the word a technicality would rather suggest that it wasn't terribly important.
I think it was very important.
Right. Now, we've looked at whether the TMO actually received a health and safety file for the building from Ryden previously with other witnesses. Now, was there ever, as far as you were aware, a health and safety file held by the TMO that met the relevant regulatory requirements?
Health and safety file, whilst it should be compiled as the job proceeds, isn't normally handed over until completion or after completion, so that all the paperwork is in place. I think when I left the TMO, we hadn't reached that position, so I wouldn't know whether the TMO had one or not.
Yeah, just to be clear for those listening, you left the TMO on the 30th of June.
That's correct.
2016.
Yes.
And that was before the certificate of practical completion, I think, that was issued in respect of the refurbishment.
Correct.
Yes. Nonetheless, were you aware before you left, so between October 2015 and the end of June 2016, that the TMO, as principal designer, had a regulatory responsibility to review, update, and revise the health and safety file from time to time?
Yes, but I thought there had been an understanding at some time that Artelia would assist in that process. I may be wrong, my memory may be playing tricks on me, but I seem to remember seeing a post-meeting note on the minutes giving that information.
Well, we're going to cover that with other witnesses, but I just want your evidence.
Yeah.
Were you personally aware that the TMO, as principal designer, had a responsibility under the CDM regulations to review, update, and revise the health and safety file from time to time as a continuing process?
Yes.
Can you explain why, to your knowledge, the health and safety file, such as there ever was not reviewed, updated, and revised?
I think I've explained the circumstances. I think I've answered that
Right.
already.
When the TMO took on the role of principal designer, as we can see they did, reluctantly, uncomfortably, I can understand, as you've told us, did they not satisfy themselves of precisely what their statutory obligations were and go about satisfying them?
We were the named principal designer. but my understanding was that Artelia had at one point agreed to assist in that process. So yes, in terms of regulation, it was our role, but we had been offered, I believe, some assistance.
In fact, what happened, and I can take this shortly, is that Ryden took on the role of completing the health and safety file. And my question for you is, what steps did you take to ensure that the TMO, as the principal designer, kept tabs on Ryden's work in producing the health and safety file?
I think I've already explained that. It hadn't been, and I think normally it is the case, it isn't put together until the end of the contract, although it should be put together as soon as you have the information that's available. So it should be happening, but generally it doesn't happen at the end of the process.
Yes, thank you.
So,
Mr. Chairman, I've come to the end of my prepared questions, and I suspect it's also an appropriate time for a break.
It is, but I'd just like a little bit more help from Mr. Gibson on this last point.
Yeah.
Did anyone within the TMO, as far as you can remember, actually take the trouble to identify what the obligations of the principal designer were?
I think I was generally aware of the obligations. I think we were all aware of the obligations, and we were trying to find a way of achieving the desired outcome.
So should I understand that although you were aware that the file should be compiled and updated as the work progressed,
Yep.
you accepted, in a sense, as a fait accompli, that you wouldn't actually receive a file, or there wouldn't be a file until the end of the work?
I've never had a file before the end of work.
All right, thank you. Do you want to follow up on that?
I might, Mr. Chairman, but in order to do that, I think I need a document. I do need a document.
Well, should we take a break at this
we
point
can
in any
take a break.
event?
Yes.
Otherwise, you think you've reached the end of your question?
Yes, I have, but we were going to take the slightly longer break because there are others who want
Well, when you say slightly longer, what do you suggest?
30 minutes.
30 minutes?
Yes.
All right. Well, Mr. Gibson, we normally do have a break, not only because it's the middle of the morning, but because at this point Council needs an opportunity to consider whether there are any further questions that ought to be asked,
Yes.
And whether any questions have come in from elsewhere that we need to put to you. We don't usually take half an hour, but I think on this occasion we'll do that. So we'll resume at 12 o'clock, please. And I must ask you again not to talk to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it while you're out of the room.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
thank
right?
you.
Thank you very much. Would you go with the usher?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I should just mention for those benefit of those listening that I had made it clear to them that I thought it was appropriate that we would, with the TMO witnesses, take a slightly longer break, so that others who had more direct relationships with them could
Yes.
give
All
us
right, very
relevant
well.
questions.
Well, anyway, there it is. I've said, we'll say 12 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you ask Mr. Gibson to come back in, please? Right, Mr. Gibson. Well, we'll see if Mr. Millett's found some more questions for you. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. One or two, Mr. Gibson, so this won't take terribly long. The first question I want to ask you was about the scoring of the tender that we've been discussing. And you remember that some residents were involved or were to be involved in the scoring process. Now, that's a topic that may very well be revisited later in this inquiry. But while I have you here, it's a short question. You say in your first statement at paragraph 52, if I can just have that up, that two leaseholders were involved in the tender review process, and the first of which is Pilly Burton, flat 165, now deceased. Now, Mr. Burton, Nicholas Burton, her husband, says in his statement that he's got no recollection of her being involved. And my question is only with this: are you quite sure that Pilly Burton was involved in the scoring process?
We had two leaseholders. It was actually the PQQ process as opposed to the tender process. So it was the first part of the process who had been nominated from our leasehold section as leaseholders who were interested in taking part or being involved in forums, etc. And two leaseholders attended. I think I was provided these names. I cannot remember the names of the people who were there, but there were two people.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't remember, in fact, whether it was Pilly Burton or perhaps somebody else?
I don't recall the names.
Right, okay. Just while I'm on that topic, and again, it's something we will likely revisit at Module 3, were you involved in deciding which aspects of the tenders residents would be involved in scoring?
I think we had a discussion about it, so I would have been involved in a discussion as to what was most appropriate.
Right. And what was the basis on which the aspects they would be involved in was decided?
The likely technicalities of the contractor's response.
Can I then go to a different question in relation to the TMO taking on the role of principal designer? When the decision was made, in the circumstances you've already described, in the October of 2015, to take on the role of principal designer, what stage in the construction had been reached on the Grenfell Tower project? Can you recall?
Well, we're now in an extended contract period. I can't remember exactly. I expect the cladding had largely been completed. I don't know. I would have to look at the contractor's programme to assess.
Right. Can you recall or give us a feel for how much of the construction remained outstanding?
No, 15-20% possibly.
Right.
But I could well be inaccurate in that.
When the role was taken on, did you give any thought to how much design work would be required at that stage of the process?
Yes, there had been discussions in that it was now construction that was going on. The design had, I think the term used was fundamentally complete at that stage.
Yes, that's a term that I think Claire Williams has used in her evidence.
Yes.
You say it was a term that was used.
Yes.
Is that a term used generally in the TMO at this time?
No.
To describe the project?
No.
Right.
But it was a term, it was terminology that had been advised, I think, someone in meetings with Claire as to if it's agreed that the design is fundamentally complete, it will lessen our risk in terms of taking on the reluctant role we took on.
Yes.
Yeah.
In what respects wasn't it complete?
I think it was complete,
Okay.
but I may be wrong. But
Well, we can explore that perhaps with Miss Williams when she comes to give evidence. Finally, on the question of health and safety generally, who was the person at a senior-most level in the TMO, in other words, on the TMO's board, who was responsible for health and safety matters?
But I think there's a chain of command through the Health and Safety Department to various managers onto the executive team, and then I'm assuming ultimately Robert Black.
Right. Did the person, you say Robert Black, did
I'm
Robert...
just trying to follow the chain of command.
Well, certainly, but was there any particular member of the TMO board who was specifically charged with the responsibility for health and safety matters generally?
I don't know.
Right. Do you know whether there was any person on the TMO board, in other words, at a director's level, who was charged with health and safety responsibilities in respect of the Grenfell Tower project itself?
I don't know.
You don't know? Right. Did you ever... Is that not something that you ever thought about?
No, I didn't.
You didn't? Right. Well, Mr. Gibson, thank you. Those are my questions. It remains for me to thank you, and I have one remaining question as well, and it's a question that we tend to ask people in positions of particular responsibility. We've been through a day and a half's evidence now, looking back on a number of months and years of what happened. And my question to you is this: looking back on it, is there anything that you think you should have done differently?
I think with the benefit of hindsight, when I raised the query about the insulation and got the assurance I received, I would have liked to have followed that up.
Right. Well, Mr. Gibson, I've got no further questions for you. It remains for me to thank you and for coming to assist us with our inquiries and answering my questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Gibson, I would add my thanks to those of Mr. Millett. It's been very helpful to hear your evidence, and we're all very grateful to you for coming along to tell us what you know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and you're now free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Millett, you have another witness, but I think we need to rise for a couple of minutes for housekeeping purposes, don't we?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there's a cleaning process that has to happen,
Yes.
I'm afraid. I'm told that normally takes about 5 minutes, but I'm in your hands.
Well, you send someone to come and get us when you're ready. I think that's the best thing.
Very well. It's likely to be about 5 minutes.
Yes, well, that would be fine.
For others watching, so they can
Right.
tune back in again.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, I now call Miss Claire Williams, please.
Thank you very much.
Can you please read out the witness affirmation to me?
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Miss Williams. Sit down and make yourself comfortable. Right. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ms. Williams, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can I start by thanking you very much for attending the inquiry and assisting us with our investigations? We are extremely grateful to you. The questions that I'm going to ask you are intended to be short and simple. Sometimes they don't work out that way. If there's a question you don't understand, I can put it again or I can put it in a different way. Can I also ask you to keep your voice up so that the transcriber who sits to your immediate right can get down everything you're saying? And on that point, if you nod and shake your head, that doesn't go on the transcript, so you have to say yes or no, as the case may be. We're going to take scheduled breaks. We'll stop at about 1 o'clock or so for the lunch break, and we'll take a break in the afternoon. And when it comes to Monday, we'll take a break in the morning and the afternoon as well. But if you need a break at any other time, please just indicate, and we can do that. Now, on your desk are a number of statements to the inquiry. You've made, I think, quite a number. We're going to be looking at 5 of them, which address the issues in Module 1. And they'll appear on your screen as well as in the hard copy in the file if you need to look at that. But most of the time we'll be looking, or certainly from my perspective, all of the time looking at what's on the screen. And it may be sensible just to keep following that. Can we start with your first statement, which is dated the 15th of February 2019. That's at TMO 00840364. And I'm going to call that your February 2019 statement. That's your first statement, and I think your longest. If we go to TMO 00842312, that's your September 2019 statement. Is that that statement?
It has no date on it, but I assume so. I presume the date's right at the bottom. Somewhere.
Yes. Okay. And then we have the two statements in January 2020, TMO 00863359. If we can have that up. That's dated the 14th of January 2020. The next one is TMO 0085369797, which is dated the 20th of January. And we'll call that the 20th of January statement, 2020 statement. And that's there as well. And then finally, your fifth one for this purpose is dated the 23rd of February 2020. That's TMO 00866580. We could just have that up. That's dated the 23rd of February 2020. You could just identify that formally for us. Now, are those statements that I've shown you your statements?
From the front page, I believe them to be
Yes.
so. Yes.
Yes. Well, we'll be looking at the rest of them in due course. Have you read those statements recently?
I have.
You have. And subject to some corrections I'm going to put to you in a moment, can you confirm that they're true?
Yes.
Now, can we go first, please, to TMO 00863359, which is your 14th of January statement, at page 3. And I want to look at paragraph 14 of that, please. You cite a document reference there, which is ART 404531. Now, we understand that that's a wrong reference and that you wish to correct the reference to ART 406195. That's what we've been told. Is that correct?
I haven't had access to these documents. I think they were numbered by the inquiry. So
Yes, they have been. Well, you're referring there, when we're going to come to it in due course in your evidence, to the formal advice to the TMO about the abolition of the CDMC role. And perhaps I should just show you the document so that we can correct it. ART 406195, please. Just want to get this right at the start of your evidence. Is that the document you were intending to refer to? It's an email of the 25th of September 2015 from Simon Cash to Paul Burrows.
Can I see the previous screen, please?
The previous screen, certainly. ART.
Yeah, the one with the document reference.
Yes,
I
of course.
thought it-
TMO 00863359 at page 3.
So paragraph 14 says, Paul Burrows of Atelier replied to me. Can I see the email again, please?
Yes. It's ART 406195.
That isn't to me, so I don't know.
Right. Well, we've been told that that is what you want to refer to, and this is an email from Simon Cash to Paul Burrows. Perhaps there's one lower down. Perhaps we should scan down to page 2, where you do see an email from Paul Burrows to you.
Yes, that looks more
Right.
likely.
My fault. I took you to the wrong.
Can we just see the relevant part of the text? And
Yes,
really
yes,
nice.
we can certainly do that. It says, "Hi Claire,
Yeah.
under CDM 2015, the CDMC role terminates. At close of 5th of October, the role of CDMC has been abolished and a new role created, that of principal designer."
right?
Was that the email you were wanting to refer
Yes,
to?
yes,
Yes,
that's the
thank
right
you.
document.
Right. The paragraph 14 that we've been looking at in this statement is identical in the later January statement, the 20th of January statement, also at paragraph 14. And then would it follow that you also have to correct that reference in that statement? Yes, thank you very much. So, save for those corrections, I think you've confirmed that the contents of those 5 statements are true. Can I ask you, have you discussed those statements or your evidence with anybody before coming here today?
No.
Right. I'm going to begin the substantive topics then, Miss Williams, if I may, with looking at your background, qualifications and experience. And first of all, I'd like to start with your work history. It's right, I think, that you joined the TMO on the 9th of September 2013, isn't it?
Yes.
And the role that you took up was project manager,
Yes.
and you sat within the asset and regeneration team.
Yes.
Yes. And just looking at the wider context of the state of the Grenfell Tower project when you started, just correct me if any of this is wrong. Is it right that the OJEU tender was running for a main contractor for the Grenfell Tower project?
I'm not quite sure at the date that it started.
Right.
It was due. I don't know the date that it was actually started.
I
But
see.
that was always the plan.
All right, but it was certainly due.
Yes.
I think, in fact, the tender was already at the PQQ stage.
Yes.
you
so
don't- all right.
I had forgotten.
No, all right. Did you know that some appointments had already been made for the project? For example, Studio E and Artelia?
Yes.
Yes. Can we look at your February 2019 statement at page 2? And I want to go to paragraph 10 on that page, please. You say in paragraph 10, "I have a diploma in maintenance management and have worked all my career in housing for either local authorities or housing associations concerned with maintenance, repairs and regeneration projects. I also worked on some new build and refurbishment works." When did you get your diploma?
It was when I was working for the London Borough of Haringey, so between 1983 and 1992.
Right. Do you remember when in those years you got the diploma?
It would be towards the end, probably 1990, if I was to have a guess.
Right. Can you give us a sense of the sorts of things that you learnt on your diploma?
It was an Institute of Building diploma in maintenance management. It had a section on basic technical understanding. It had a section, I believe, in structural legal issues. It was equivalent of an HNC, but so in all honesty, it was a little while ago. But it covered a little bit of technical, a little bit of legal, and perhaps ancillary matters related to construction.
Right. And of the basic technical understanding that you learnt on that, can you give us a sense of what that contained? What sort of technical issues or questions did it cover?
It was maintenance orientated, so it would have been about the naming of parts. It would have been about how a foundation works, how a roof works, how walls and external structure work. It was maintenance orientated.
Right, management orientated. Did you ever get any education within the diploma on the building regulations?
It would have referred to them, but I think it was done over 6 months as a sort of day release or something like that. So it was an overview rather than specific detail.
Did you ever get any education on the approved documents that formed part of the building regulations?
No, not as part of that arrangement.
Not as part of that. Okay. Did you ever get any education on the approved documents?
No, but I obviously have an awareness that they exist.
Yes. All right. Can we look at your February 2019 statement, TMO 00840364? And I want to go to page 7 in that document and look, please, at paragraph 35 with you. You say there, I personally had previous experience of project managing refurbishment works from a client/landlord perspective, but I had no previous experience of works involving cladding. And you also say later in your statement, and it's paragraph 71, and I don't think we need to turn it up, but you say you never had any involvement or technical understanding of cladding work. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Now you say, you as you do, you had previous experience of project managing refurbishment works. I just want to understand a little bit more about those projects. What were those refurbishment projects? Can you list some?
I worked on what they called the Rough Sleepers Initiative,
Right.
which was effectively bringing voids back into empty properties back into use. So it would be street properties, houses on streets, where the properties are empty, they would be stripped, they would be refurbished and so made suitable for rough sleepers. I've done small-scale projects, which I would say would be a house that may be becoming 3 flats. Again, they were all totally empty. They were refurbished, perhaps for special client groups. For example, supported housing. And I think the largest one I've worked on was one when I worked in a development department, which was the refurbishment of an old nurses' housing scheme.
Right.
That was the largest one I've done. Again, it was empty, and we brought it back into use. It was a building that had been in poor condition.
And on the largest or more significant of those projects you've just identified, what was your role?
It would have been project manager for the client.
Right. So was that a formal title as well as a functional role?
I'm trying to remember what the title was. I would say it would be project manager, but it was only project manager in terms of the client. So it would be briefing the housing management teams to when the properties were due to be completed so that they could then get people straight in. It would be about consulting with the in-house teams about finishes or any specific requirements, for example.
I see.
I don't know, additional sockets or something of that sort.
And your largest project, the nurses' housing scheme that you just referred to, can you give us a date which would indicate when that was?
It was when I was at Circle, so it would have been from 1992 on. I honestly don't know. I would say between 95 and 2000.
I see.
But it's best guess.
Now, am I right in thinking that before you joined the TMO in the September of 2013, a large part of your career was focused on maintenance and repair of properties?
I had also worked probably for 15 years in housing development, which is working as project manager on new build development, so small estates, small blocks of properties, but where another part of the organisation had acquired the site, and I would then take the contract on site.
And had any of those projects involved a high-rise block of flats?
No.
Would you say this is fair, or maybe it's not, I don't know, tell me, that the refurbishment projects were not the major part of your career history before you joined the TMO?
No, they were not.
They were not. I just want to ask you some questions about what you knew about David Gibson. Can we stick with your February 2019 and go to page 2? And I want to look at paragraph 9, where you set out in your work history. And you say there that you worked for Circle Housing Trust between 1992 and 2002, and then the Circle Housing Group from 2008 to 2013. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
And did the Circle Housing Group become something known as the Old Ford Group or Association?
No, Circle Housing Group became Circle Anglia. It amalgamated.
I see. Now, David Gibson told us in his evidence that he knew you and had worked with you at Circle 33. Is that right?
I'm sorry, would you forgive me a minute? I just want to have a quick word with... Ah, that's right.
Yes.
Yes.
There's
Would
a
you like
noise.
the question again?
Yes, certainly. David Gibson told us in his evidence that you had worked with him while you were at Circle 33. Is that correct?
Yes.
It is. And could you give us the years when you worked with him at Circle 33?
We were in different departments, so it would have been between 1992, and I don't know if he was there till 2002, but it would have been in that time frame. But so we were in different departments in different buildings.
Right.
So we coincided on a project, I suspect.
He also said that you'd worked together at Old Ford, but I think that you're saying that's not right. Or is that right?
No, Old Ford is part of Circle Housing Group.
Yes.
It was one of the components of Circle Housing.
Did you work with him within Old Ford?
He managed a department. I worked in a regeneration team, and he managed the department that the team fell under.
Right. So would it be fair to say that before you joined the TMO, you knew David Gibson professionally quite well?
I wouldn't say quite well. I'd worked with him in several employs, yes.
Okay. And on several or different projects?
Different projects, yeah.
Yeah. Now, turning to the question of your arrival at the TMO, we know that David Gibson started his role in late February 2013, 25th to be exact. You started on the 9th of September 2013. And he told us that you had been told by him that there was an opportunity to apply for a role at the TMO. Is that right?
Yes.
Were you invited to apply by the TMO?
David mentioned it. I was being made redundant from the post I was in, so I put an application into the agency that was advertising the job.
I follow. Were you interviewed?
By the agency, yes, and then formally by the TMO.
And when you were interviewed by the TMO, were you interviewed by David Gibson?
Yes.
Did he lead the interview?
No, it was Peter Madison was there as well.
Who else interviewed you, apart from Peter Madison and David Gibson?
Nobody.
Nobody, just the two of you. I see. Were you asked during your interview, or at any stage during your recruitment process, about your experience in major works involving construction projects?
Yes, I was.
What did you say?
I had obviously aligned my CV to that, to say that I had worked on larger scale projects, and the previous job that I was being made redundant from involved, it was titled regeneration, but it was actually enhanced cyclical, where we were working on probably 7 or 8 blocks at a time, doing external works and communal works. It involved a lot of resident liaison work, and that they were major in terms of the cost. They were, so I think it was 55 million over 6 years was the headline for the schemes.
Right. And what was that project, the regeneration project that you've just told us about?
It was the regeneration of an estate in Tower Hamlets.
Could you give us its name?
It was called Parkside.
Parkside.
Yeah.
Right, I follow. And were you asked about your experience on Parkside and perhaps other projects too, as acting as client or employer on construction projects?
I was asked about what the works entailed and how I dealt with them as part of my role.
Right. But specifically, were you asked about your experience as client? In other words, somebody who had retained professionals?
Not particularly in relation to that project, but obviously in relation to my whole career, because I had 4 housing associations act as client on behalf of them for the new build schemes I worked on.
Right. Now, you told us that you hadn't had any experience on or of refurbishment of tower blocks. Does it follow that you'd had no experience of a project involving the recladding or overcladding of a tower block?
I've never worked on a reclad at all,
No.
on a cladding.
Were you asked that at the interview by David Gibson or Peter Madison?
I don't remember.
Right. Did the subject come up at all during the interview?
I don't remember.
Now, if we don't think we need to look at it, but in your February 2019 statement, you say that the role that you were being interviewed for required experience of working with residents in situ because the refurbishment for Grenfell Tower was going to happen with the residents in occupation. Was that a particular point that came up in the interview?
Very much so. And my previous experience had been the scheme I've just described in Tower Hamlets was a lot of work with residents where they were being asked to pay for works. So I'd been involved in lots of resident meetings, providing residents with information, and it was a major part of the job, whichever part of the role they were interviewing for, that it was definitely a major part of the
Right.
job.
And you were obviously successful in the application. To your understanding, was the main reason that you were successful your experience and skill in working with residents in a refurbishment where they remained in occupation?
I don't know, I didn't ask.
No. But what did you understand that might have scored a hit?
I was interrogated on it, so possibly that was important,
Okay.
but I didn't ask after the event.
All right. Can we then turn to your knowledge and training on fire and health and safety matters? As at September 2013, when you joined the TMO, had you had any training in fire safety?
I, at one point, was a fire marshal, so I'd been out in the car park with the carbon monoxide.
Right. But had you had any
canister,
training?
But no, not specifically.
So do we take it that you had no training or technical education on fire safety with regard to a building owner's or a responsible person's obligations under the Fire Safety Order 2005, or otherwise known as the Regulatory Reform Order?
Yes, I haven't had training in that.
Right. Did you have, leaving aside a formal education on those matters, would you have a working knowledge or familiarity of fire safety in residential buildings?
I would be aware that there would be requirements and that I would hope I would be able to identify the people in my organisation who would manage those.
Right. From 2005 onwards, did you have any detailed knowledge or experience or familiarity with the legislation and regulations under the Fire Safety Order?
No.
No. Had you done any health and safety training?
In my last, well, I think in my last employments, there'd been a lot of e-learning. So there may have been some health and safety training in those, which would be very generic.
Right. Did you ever receive any education, formal or by way of perhaps less formal education or experience on health and safety obligations of owners or responsible people for residential buildings?
No.
Right. Now, turning to your role at the TMO, you, I think, reported to David Gibson, as I think you've made clear. He was your line
Yes.
manager. Yes. And his title was Head of Capital Investment, and he reported to me to Peter Madison, as he told us. That was the basic line of command, wasn't it?
Yes.
And Peter Madison's job title was Director of Assets and Regeneration, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, is it right that none of you three, neither you nor David Gibson nor Peter Madison, sat on the executive board of the TMO?
That's right, yeah.
Can we go to your February 2019 statement at page 4, TMO 00840364, at page 4, please? And I want to look with you, please, at paragraph 18. You say there, my role was to monitor the programme and budget for the TMO. I should point out to you, this is under the heading, modifications to the interior and exterior of the building, that's Grenfell Tower, between 2012 and 2016. So that's the context in which you're saying what I'm going to show you. And you say, my role was to monitor the programme and budget for the TMO. It was largely a reporting function, and my role was not to manage the contract. Professional consultants were employed for this. I fronted the scheme for residents as their TMO point of contact, liaising with residents and the principal contractor, Ryden, and others throughout the works. And at paragraph 19, you go on to say, my role was to keep residents informed and to liaise with them and to report to others within TMO and RBKC. My role was very specifically in relation to monitoring, liaison, and facilitation. Now, you say there that your role wasn't to manage the contract. What contract are you referring to?
This is in relation to the JCT design and build contract.
With Ryden?
With Ryden, yes.
Whose job was it to manage the contract?
Our employer's agent, Atelier, were tasked with that.
When you arrived at the TMO, did anybody tell you that Artelier's task was to manage the Ryden contract?
They had been appointed before my arrival as employer's agent.
And what did you understand the role of managing the contract, to use your words, involve?
Atelier as employer's agent, they manage the contract by putting processes in place, whether it be change control spreadsheets or handover spreadsheets. They managed variations, they managed anything that would impact on the contract, and obviously their role is to get it through to handover and practical completion, certifying as need be.
Right. When you arrived, sorry, did you want to finish your? Okay. When you arrived, September 2013, did you investigate what the contract between TMO and Artelia was?
I had a lot of information in my directories that I started to wade through, my electronic directories. So I did try to interrogate what their role was, yes.
Right. And what did you discover?
That they'd been employed previously, and my understanding was that we were formalising their contract because they'd been doing it on a previous basis because the scheme had started and then stopped.
Yes.
So my colleague Jenny Jackson, who did the procurement, was working with them to get their new roles into a contract.
Right. Did you think at that time, this is September 2013, so just to help you, before the July 2014 formal contract, did you think that at that time Artelia were the employer's agent on the Grenfell Tower project? Yes. What gave you to think that?
There was a spreadsheet with the roles and the fee figures against it.
Now, you go on in fact, you say in your first sentence of paragraph 18 that your role was to monitor the programme and the budget. In your function of monitoring the budget, presumably you would have to know what the contract or who the contractors were on the project.
When I took on the spreadsheet, there was just, I suspect, the cost estimate from Atelier in as the budget for the works cost. The budget inevitably had on costs as well.
I see. So you got figures, but you didn't have anything to tell you who was doing what?
The budget is a list of figures. You just put works against it. It doesn't matter who the contractor is. At the early stage, later stage, it doesn't matter. It still works.
Okay. Did you know at that stage in your exercise of the function of monitoring the budget who the TMO had retained as its professionals at that date on the Grenfell Tower project?
Yes, because there was a figure for works, and then there was several consultants named and a figure against their name.
Right. Can you remember who the consultants were?
it would be the ones who I believe went on, did go on with the project. So it was Atelier, Curtains, Studio E, and there was a couple of odd ones that I don't know where they came from, and I never heard of them since.
What about Exova?
I don't know whether Exova are on there. I put them on subsequent,
Right, I
but
see.
initially I don't know that they were on there.
I see. Did you investigate how the contractors that you did see on there and you've listed were charging? Did you see how much they were charging and what the arrangements for their fees?
That's when I started the job. That was one of the things I had to wade through because there were figures against different tasks,
Yeah.
different roles.
I see. And when you say in the last sentence of paragraph 19 that your role was very specifically in relation to monitoring, liaison and facilitation, to what extent were you autonomous in those matters, and to what extent were you reporting to those above you?
I was reporting to those above me. The role of the project manager, I believe, is always about getting in the decisions that need to be made and passing them on to others
Yeah.
to get confirmation. So I would report to others.
Yes. Now, the other professionals in the project, and we've heard a lot of evidence from them during the course of this module so far, referred to the TMO from time to time as the client. Would you agree that you were a representative of the client from time to time?
Yes.
Yeah. And that basically you were the person within the TMO facing Ryden?
Yes.
Yes. And as client, is it right that the TMO as a body would have to make a wide range of decisions, both before and during the construction?
Yes.
Yes. Did you personally make any decisions about instructing variations?
I can think of one example which was minor, under £5,000, which was a practical issue. Otherwise, I would always take the issue up.
Right, I see. So £5,000, was that a set limit under which you could make any decisions?
It was my view that was reasonable to keep the project going.
I see.
Anything over that, I would have been wary of.
Right, so this was a limit set by yourself
It was.
for common sense reasons, essentially.
Yes.
I see. Not a formal limit imposed on you by some sort of scheme.
No.
Right. Did you ever make any personal decisions about spending on the project?
No.
No, none at all. Even below 5,000.
I don't remember making any because it was a big project and it all adds up, so no.
Right, I see. Did you make any decisions yourself about appointments directly to the TMO, such as Artelia or John Rowan or Max Fordham or Exova?
I was involved with the tender process for getting the Clerk of Works on
Yes.
board, but otherwise no.
Well, and we're going to come to that, but otherwise no, you say. Okay. I want to just look at the issue of design decision making, very specifically with you. Can we start by looking at RYD 18951, please? This is your email of the 29th of September 2014 to Simon Lawrence. So this is a year or so into your role, and you say, Simon's, because it goes to both Simon Lawrence and Simon O'Connor, I'm aware that you are having design meetings, and there are a couple of things I need to be up to date on. One, window design, subject to Mr. Devan's latest inquiry. Two, schedule for when we are going to get client choice, specifically bearing in mind that the TMO is taking on the responsibility of design advisor. Now, you've said in various witness statements that you relied on the professionals appointed for design decisions. Looking at this, would you accept that the TMO was making final decisions on design?
The window design is a big issue, and I don't know if you want to talk about that now, but the issue we were making was about client choice, which was about colours and types of kitchen units.
I see. But you can see there that you say that the TMO is taking on the responsibility of design advisor. At the time, and I know there's a history to this we're going to look at, but at this time, did you not think that that meant that the TMO was going to be making design decisions?
It was clarification in this contract because I think there was this issue of the client design advisor, and the TMO had said that we would take on that role for a limited area of the project, and it was actually more clarification because the specifications were already written. So we were just saying, I want this colour kitchen rather than that colour kitchen. It wasn't anything that had a contractual implication financially or programme-wise.
Okay, well, maybe we'll come back to that in due course, but I think for present purposes, are you telling us that the role of design advisor to which you were referring in this email was very much limited to things like colours?
Yes.
I see. Now, just looking at the TMO's professionalism within its team generally, Philip Booth of Artelia has given evidence to the inquiry, and I just want to show you what he says. It's the transcript, please, for day 49, page 171, please. And I just want to show you page 171, lines 23 to 24. He says there, and this was in the context of him being asked by Miss Grange about whether the project needed a client advisor, and he says at line 22, I think I would have said that yes, it needs one, but the TMO had a massive team. Some of them were architects, some of them were fire engineers, so I wasn't concerned when they said we'll take it on. I think we need to take it ourselves. Is Philip Booth right that the TMO had a massive team containing architects and fire engineers?
Yes, there were many skills within the organisation.
Who within the TMO was a fire engineer?
I would suggest that he's talking about our fire risk assessor rather than a fire engineer as such.
Right. There's a difference, isn't there?
There is.
Quite a big difference, in fact.
Yeah, no, apologies. I should have picked you up. We had a fire risk assessor accessible to us.
So, in fact, the TMO did not have in-house access to fire engineering expertise, properly so called.
That's true.
Right. I want to look now at Artelia and at the question of project manager. Who was it? In your February 2019 statement at paragraph 3, this is page 1, February 2019 statement, page 1, please. You say at paragraph 3, I was TMO's project manager for the Grenfell Tower refurbishment from September 2013 to practical completion in July 2016. And you described in your February 2019 statement at page 7, paragraph 35, what I showed you before, there's no need to go to it, which was your personal previous experience of project managing refurbishments from a client/landlord perspective. We looked at that. Now, just looking at those two pieces of evidence together, why do you call yourself a project manager in respect of the Grenfell Tower project?
It was my job title, and in terms of Grenfell Tower, I was the client, and I project managed that part of the role. So making sure that client decisions were made to facilitate the project, really.
Right. Does that mean that you had a general oversight of the works for the refurbishment?
In terms of reporting on programme, yes.
In terms of programme and I think budget?
Budget as well.
Yes, I see. But I think you exclude from that matters of design.
Yes, but it was something that I initially hadn't assumed that we'd be doing. But when it cropped up, we decided, David Gibson and myself, that we could do that.
Right.
For just specific areas of the project.
Yes, so cutting through this, am I right in thinking that your title or your self-description of project manager, it really just meant that you were the person in the TMO responsible for overseeing the Grenfell Tower project as a client's project?
It was project managing the client element.
Project managing the client element, I understand. Not project managing the project.
No.
Right. Now, do you recall, and we can look at the documents if need be, that Artelia signed formal engagements on the 9th of July 2014 with the TMO?
I'm sure that's right if you say.
Okay, I just want to see if I can get your recollection, and we can go to the documents if need be.
Are we going to look at the formal engagement?
We can.
Well, I'm not suggesting we should, and if you weren't minded to take the witness to it, but if we are, this might be a point
To break.
to break.
Well, it might. Let me see. Yes. Well, let's break then, and I can pick it up. Before we do, let me see if I can get to it more quickly. Ms. Williams, do you remember that when the formal contract between the TMO and Artelia was signed in the July of 2014, Artelia deleted the role of project manager from the contract?
I would have expected them to. I didn't think that it wasn't a fee we were paying for as project manager.
Very good. In which case, I don't think I need to see the document. And is that a convenient moment?
I think it is, yes. Thank you very much. Well, Ms. Williams, although you've only just started giving evidence, I'm afraid it's time to take a break so we can all get some lunch. So we'll stop now. We'll start again at 2 o'clock, please. And I must ask you not to talk to anyone about your evidence or anything related to it while you're out of the room. All right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to go with the usher, please? Good. 2 o'clock then, please. Thank you.